When you go to an Asheville City Soccer Club game, you're not just watching soccer, you're welcomed into what players and fans call the South Slope Blues.
The South Slope Blues, they're amazing.
This is the coach of the women's team, Brooke Bingham.
The atmosphere is what makes Asheville City Soccer so great.
Longtime player Laura Greb.
We have the most dedicated fans. We have our South Slope Blues. They post up in the corner of the field every game. They've got their drums, they've got their smoke, they've got their loud voices. You can hear them for miles.
Elite men and women players from throughout North Carolina team up in Asheville for a 2-month season against other aspiring pros from all over the Southeast. Home games this season begin May 18th at Greenwood Field on the UNC Asheville campus. For details, tickets, and your first steps into the South Slope Blues, visit Asheville City Soccer Club at ashevillecitysc.com.
Sometimes my messes are all that you'll find. I'll tell a story, both true and allegory. Oh, the process is precious, so it takes up all my time.
We all know the impact of Asheville's skyrocketing housing costs. What we don't hear nearly as much about is how artists and arts organizations are finding it more challenging to do their work in Asheville.
If you're an artist and based on just what we saw in the findings and what artists are making, they can't afford their spaces if they haven't bought them already. So there seems like there's a big divide between how do we close that gap.
This is The Overlook with Matt Peiken, a podcast about the news, arts, issues, and trends of Asheville. Affordable workspaces was the topic of the latest ArtsAVL Town Hall. I moderated the May 10th panel at Asheville Community Theater and recorded it to bring it to you here today. Today, it is an extension of some of the things I've been talking about on my show. And we have some great guests here. I'm going to introduce them. DeWayne Barton from Blue Note Junction, Rebekkah Hilgraves from RadHaus Studios, Ashleigh Koslow from Lexington Glassworks, Jeffrey Burroughs of the River Arts District Artists, and Tamara Sparacino from Asheville Community Theater. I don't know that we have a lot of solutions in bulk, but each of their organizations are doing some really interesting things. And we're going to just briefly go through and talk about what they're doing for their organizations and for the community at large, in some cases, in what they're doing to help solve and address some of these space issues and crises. Let's start with you, DeWayne. You've got your hands in so many things here, whether it's hood huggers, peace gardens, now Blue Note Junction. How did Blue Note Junction even begin to take seed in your head, and what do you want to accomplish with it? What is it going to be?
For me, Blue Note Junction came out of the Peace Gardens. We was doing a Peace Garden, and then we got another piece of property, and we know how art was such a powerful thing for restoring neighborhoods. So we say, okay, if we rent out this house, let's make sure we rent it to an artist. And then that artist can contribute, and then just creating a space for artists. And of course, with the tours, highlighting artists and businesses, particularly African-American businesses and artists in the area. Just the experience of doing it for over 20 plus years of trying to improve community through the arts, it just led us to what else can we do?
I just want to be clear about this, and you can clarify this. So from what I understand, it's going to be, at least on paper, you have it as a performance venue and an artist studio village, along with an outdoor community spa, a salon, a market, a commercial kitchen, and co-working spaces.
Yeah, all of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how are you accomplishing all that? Because in short, nothing like that exists in this community right now, and that's a big dream. How are you accomplishing this?
We get money.
That simple? How are you getting now?
Yeah,
what kind of
money? We're trying to get money to do it, and then we're using all our community partners. We resting on everybody, but to really be honest with you, the Blue Note Junction, another thing that drove it is the highway expansion, because we was hoping that DOT was going to pay for a business incubator in the neighborhood.
Really?
And they were like, nah, we're not going to do it. So we said, okay, as a community, how could we make this dream happen? So this really was anchored in our neighborhood plan that we created back in 2009.
That's a long time ago. What's your budget for now? Obviously, just the cost of doing everything has amplified and magnified exponentially.
Right.
What's the budget now, and how much have you raised of it?
We got to hit $7 million and maybe a little bit higher, and we probably raised about $2.2 million so far.
Wow. Of that $2.2 million, how much of that is small dollar donation from the community, and how much of it comes from real big-pocketed, deep-pocketed, generous supporters?
I think we might have raised about $350K through small donations.
$350,000 through small donations.
That's about right. And then we just got about $500K from the TDA.
Tourism Development Authority.
Tourism Development Authority. And then the Mellon Foundation, they gave us about $500K. We're expecting to hit RWJ, Robert Woods Johnson Foundation. We was one of their culture of health leaders, and they planning to pay a visit back to Asheville in June. So the goal is to try to hit them up for it. Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot, and I want to come back to that. Let's go just one step down the line to Ashleigh, Lexington Glassworks. Tell us a little bit about the workings of that. How many glass artists are working out of Lexington Glassworks?
Lexington Glassworks was founded almost 10 years ago by Jeff Koslow and Billy Guilford, and they are the glass artists who are the co-owners and artists. And then we have 3 to 4 other artists who work at the studio.
Just 3 to 4 other artists.
Yeah, it's impressive how much glass they are able to create. And we blow glass 7 days a week, so we are always working in, a 10 to 6 work day. So we're creating all the time.
Tell me about the glass working community at large in this city. Are there studios? Are there workspaces for glass artists?
Glass blowing is one of those things. It captures you. You really develop a love for it, and you see it, it's magnetic, it's fire, it's smoke, it's flame, it's performative. It's really interesting to watch, and I think a lot of people really develop a love for it.
There's a real community among the glass blowing
Right. There's
workers.
A lot of people who really want to have that time with hands-on material and have access to space to do that. And there are a couple of other glassblowing studios in the area. North Carolina Glass is a great place to go and rent studio time and do workshops and classes. And we are really fortunate, and one of the reasons Lexington Glassworks really wanted to be in the Asheville community is because there is such a rich community of glass artists, but history of glass here in Western North Carolina. And we have a wealth of knowledge and support and love for our medium here.
Yeah.
So.
Tamara, let's talk a little bit about ACT. One of the things that I think is a real jewel and rare in this community, you have an ancillary space called 35 Below. And before we get to the expansion of what you're doing in your basement here in the core building, talk about the role of 35 Below in the community for theater makers here.
Well, 35 Below is a 40-seat theater, and it's a black box theater, so it has a lot of flexibility. You can do a lot down there, even though it's a small space. And we have done various things with it over the years, but currently what we're doing is creating an application process for local groups or local individuals that want to produce a show. And they can apply, and they get 2 weekends of performances plus 4 nights or days of rehearsal in the space. And then they can produce their own work down there. And we do that. We try to make it as affordable as possible by doing it as a ticket split. ACT gets a portion, and the artist gets a portion after some basic expenses. And then ACT will run the box office and do all the administrative pieces in the front of house for the artist so they can focus on actually producing the work.
And to be clear, the groups, they're not paying anything up front for this. It's a ticket split, correct? And so they get 4 rehearsals out of that.
Correct.
So that's probably teching in the space. That's pretty amazing. Does ACT own its buildings?
Yes, we are very fortunate. We own this building, and we have a building next door that is just filled with 16,000 costumes and props. And so we own both of those spaces.
I know you've recently renovated your basement space here, so tell me about the uses that you're getting out of that.
We have a need here because we have our education programs really flourish here. We need more space. We're one of those businesses that we're fortunate to have this space, but we need more. And so we took the basement, which was our scene shop, and it was really dark and full of machinery. And Jill Summers, our production manager, managed to find a way to get rid of a lot of it and move our scene shop upstairs. And then we renovated that space downstairs and made it into a studio, which is a classroom/rehearsal space. So it's allowed us to expand what we can do here, and at the same time, it creates more space on the main stage for other groups to use the main stage because we don't have to use it for rehearsal as much, although it is pretty busy here at all times.
Yeah, so the main stage, it is available to the community when there's cracks in the schedule.
Correct. The main stage is available for just straight rentals. We really can't do productions because we don't have the time to give for rehearsal space for people renting it. So we really use it for just groups that want to do a movie or want to do a speech or something like that.
Rebekkah, let's talk about RadHaus Studios. From what I understand, there's a recording studio and 2 band rehearsal rooms. Tell us about the genesis of this. What were you doing before the development of this, and what led to developing that?
It's a fun story, actually. So I noticed that Whitehorse Black Mountain was one of the arts organizations in the presentation. We actually started inside of Whitehorse. We built a small studio in there during the pandemic because we knew that Whitehorse, without a little bit of extra help, wasn't going to survive the pandemic. So we actually came in, worked with Bob, the owner, invited artists in to do performances and stream them. So behave as though this were a full live performance in front of a live audience, only your audience is several cameras and some crew instead of a full house of people. And that went very well, actually. We did over 160 episodes of Whitehorse Live. We streamed it across a couple of different platforms, and the learning curve was a vertical climb because I had never done video before. I've been an audio engineer for many years. But once the pandemic sort of wound down and public spaces started opening up again, I wanted to keep the crew together because we had worked so well together. And there's a story there, too. It's an all-female crew. And we had such a good time working together, and the crew themselves were just an amazing collection of people from here in town. Some were students, some had just graduated from UNCA, from the music tech program, and we got on so well, and we knew we had a good thing. So once we moved out of Whitehorse, because they were doing fine on their own, we decided that we wanted to continue. So I started looking around for other spaces in town to move the studio and build it out a little bit more than what we had at Whitehorse, and found this perfect space, which was about twice as much space and twice as much money as I had originally intended to spend on a recording studio space, but it turned out to be a great thing.
Now, you own that building, correct?
I do not own that building. I wish I did.
Wow, that's a huge risk in a sense, right?
Yes, it is.
So
it's a 5-year lease, so yes.
Wow. Okay. We'll get into renting versus owning a little bit in this conversation. Let's talk with Jeffrey Burroughs with River Arts District Artists. You represent, that organization represents about 300 some artists, correct?
Over 300 artists within the district.
Now, do you serve as a lobbying voice for the artists? Tell me about the roles that RADA serves for its artists.
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting time for our organization. I think that during the pandemic, and just to be clear too, I moved here during the pandemic. I'm one of the imports from outside.
Where'd you move here from?
New York City.
Okay.
So what was really interesting to come in and then hear from community members is this transformation that happened because the district was heavily affected, of course, during the pandemic. And now that we're in a place where we're starting to open up again, there's 3 major developments that have been already approved within our district. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of community input from actually the River Arts District. So we've been pushed up against a wall where we've really had to unite as a coalition of people and artists. So I think the last year alone has really put a lot of fire under us to really formalize our organization and take it to the next level and evolve so that we can form as a real coalition and a real voice because of the change that's happening right now to the district.
Yeah, the River Arts District in particular seeing just tremendous growth, apartments there, just as a rundown.
700 units.
Yeah, among 5 or so different complexes, and hardly any road improvements there.
Yeah.
I don't know how the RAD is going to accommodate that. I know this is spinning off a little bit.
Helicopter, Uber.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what are you hearing from your artists as a recurring motif around what, as a group, they hope to accomplish in terms of affecting, if not development, affecting what space they can hold for the arts? And as Katie Cornell told me in a recent conversation, you won't be able to call it the River Arts District after too long. It would just be the River District.
And you just gave me goosebumps because that is the saddest thing. And I think that's also why we're so activated and trying to be louder. Like, hey, you're pushing us out. And for me, it's almost a bit triggering because I went through this in Soho in New York City. And I'm actually seeing the same thing happening here where we all got pushed out and all had to move uptown or out of town. And I can see it happening again. And I think that we're in a unique position, too, because we're also the majority of the artists. There's only so much space. We're not the owners of our buildings. And I don't know if there's specific villains we can point at. There's buildings that are selling for millions of dollars, and again, they're 100 years old, so they need $1 million renovation. Those studio prices are going up 400%. Likewise, we have really wonderful owners like the wonderful individuals who took over 375 Depot Street at Aura Arts, and they've worked very hard with the current tenants, including Trackside Studio, which has been able to double their artist representation, and because they didn't do a gross increase in rents, they were able to keep prices affordable for artists. But likewise, we have new developments that are coming in. I'm in a new building, and those rents, conversely, by square foot, are gregariously different. I think that there is a need for city involvement, and one of the goals as the president of the district and uniting the district, I've actually been developing a plan for how are we going to do historic preservation of buildings, so maybe they can get grants to help subsidize the funding. How do we get the city to get involved to say, hey, you know what, maybe it is important that this arts community stays within the River Arts District. 80% of new builds retail needs to be prioritized for local artists. Like, what is the city going to do, and where are they in helping us preserve this very important and necessary part of our community? Could you imagine Asheville without the River Arts District?
I think a lot of people are starting to see that disintegrate in real time, which brings me back to DeWayne, because you're developing Blue Nut Junction. It's not in the River Arts District. It's in a part of Asheville that has largely been neglected or overlooked, and it looks like you're trying to rebuild or build something that can be a real arts destination in a way that it hasn't been. How important is the location, the part of the city that you're in? How important is that to your ability to make Blue Note Junction happen?
It's my neighborhood. I want my neighborhood to be an art destination. We support visitors, and then the visitors in turn support our efforts on the ground in the neighborhood to try to protect what's left. We was looking at this from an African-American perspective. They definitely been wiping out African-American neighborhoods and landmarks. That's why we got into the tourism business, to try to protect and educate people about those places. I can remember the Wedge. Back in the day, the Wedge was filled with artists, and they was all, you know, I remember I could go to this artist's house, then go to his studio, then go to her studio. It was like that. This is not the first wave. There's a wave before this one. Yeah, our goal is to protect neighborhoods, create an art destination, and that supports the economic development of historically African-American neighborhoods.
More after this. It's spring and you want to hike bike, hit up the farmer's market, but the last thing you want to do on a warm, sunny morning is clean house. That's where Greenland Pro Cleaning comes in. They're eco-friendly, allergy-friendly, and locally owned in Asheville. Listeners of The Overlook get a free upholstery and refrigerator cleaning upgrade with their first booking. Just use the code PODCAST at checkout. Make the most of your time this spring and visit greenlandprocleaning.com/overlook. Imagine you're a classical music composer about to premiere your final symphony. Behind the scenes, your family and a stranger are about to throw everything into disarray. Welcome to A God in the Waters, the latest play by the venerable Asheville writer David Brendan Hopes. Look for a lot of laughs, but also a deeper reflection on the making of art and its impact on the people closest to the genius at work. The Sublime Theater presents A God in the Waters May 9th through 18th at the BB Theater in downtown Asheville. For tickets and details, go to thesublimetheater.org. Jeffrey was just talking about city involvement and really pushing the lever on that, needing city involvement. How important is the city's support for what you're doing? What is the city doing or not doing, or are you doing a workaround in a way? From what I understand, just trying to get new development, redevelopment happen with the city levers, it's slow. Getting permits, everything is just really slow as far as city involvement. I'm wondering how important City of Asheville itself, the government and city workers, are to what you're trying to accomplish in your neighborhood.
I mean, like I said, the first official document that I was involved in was the neighborhood plan, and that dealt heavily with feds, the city and county. The trick is to take the neighborhood vision with their plan, what they developed, and connect it to the existing plans that the city and county already developed. It's a lot.
To their master plans.
The master plan, comprehensive plan, disparity study, all of it. There's a bunch of it. But when all those policies and plans get to the neighborhood, it's like an old great disconnect. So it's like, how do you connect these two visions as one? And then it's a clear flow towards accomplishments and accountability.
One of the things that I thought is a real kind of access point here is whether you own the building or not. Jeffrey, you just alluded to in the River Arts District at large, the artists don't own their buildings. As we start seeing these escalating costs of living, escalating real estate prices, diminishing incomes for artists, how important is it that artists own their spaces?
I think it's really important. I think timing is also, we're past it, right? Like if you're looking at the current market, if you're an artist and based on just what we saw in the findings and what artists are making, they can't afford their spaces if they haven't bought them already. So there seems like there's a big divide between how do we close that gap. Now, ArtsAVL has a really great grant that they have that does allow for capital funding, but we're an arts organization that represents many artists. So we're like, do we have to start looking for real estate? Do we need a warehouse to ensure in the River Arts District that we have a place to not just represent the artists that are there, but we have initiatives for scholarship programs to help diversify the River Arts District as well? So like, how can we continue to do these initiatives or come up with these initiatives if it's already too late? That's why we need the city to help us.
I want to bring up, just for some context, there are some fantastic developments in other cities that are, if not artist-driven, it's developer-driven with artists in mind. I moved here from Minnesota, and in St. Paul, Minnesota, there's a place called the Carlton Artist Lofts. And this is a for-profit company that has a mandate for every unit in this building. I think there's 110 apartments in this building, I believe. And every unit has to have at least one working artist. You have to prove that you generate some income from the arts. Every unit has to have at least one person who qualifies for that. And your income has to be below a certain level. That might shift over time, but it has to be below a certain level. If you make too much, you cannot qualify. The Carlton Artist Lofts has a dry studio, a wet studio for artists, and a dance rehearsal studio solely for its tenants. That's just one place. I look at Greenville, South Carolina. They are developing spaces that are very artist-driven. Real estate costs, while going up, it's not like what they are in Asheville. Places like the Peace Center and others that are doing big expansions. I have a couple of thoughts about what particularly challenges Asheville, and I'm going to throw this out there, and you can tell me I'm full of it or that there's something here. One is we lack the sort of corporations in this community that have thousands of highly skilled, well-paid jobs. The people who hold those kinds of jobs in those communities, they are younger people, they tend to be younger, and they invest in their communities through philanthropy or other development. Here, it's a tourism-based economy. It's largely extractive. And that's one thing. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about that. I am also not native. I moved here about 6 years ago. And it was made very clear to me at the time that I needed to bring my own job, speaking exactly to that. And I work in tech. I had to bring a job where I could work remotely and have that kind of income. It's not here. There are maybe 2 major tech employers in town, and that's it.
It's funny you say that. So when I got hired at Blue Ridge Public Radio back in 2017, and when you go to a community and you just meet people and they say, what brought you to town? Most cities you live in, oh, I got a job at so-and-so. And they say, oh, great, where do you work? I got so-and-so. Here I told people, oh, I got a job that brought me here. And they go, you got a job? And I thought that was the most hysterical reaction. I'd never heard that before. Another part of what I think is particularly challenging, we've got a university in this town, UNC Asheville. Where do we see them in Asheville proper? There are spaces out there, could be utilized during downtime for artists, performing artists, visual artists, you name it. And they seem in their own silo in terms of intellectually, physical facilities. You look at other university towns, there's much more of an arts back and forth. I don't know if that's something you've noticed or thought about.
We've worked with UNCA quite a bit, doing programs over there and collaborating with their theater department specifically. So that's been a really good collaboration for us. But I do agree that there's a lot more room for collaboration. And I wanted to just comment on the owning your own space, if I might, for a minute. For people to understand how important it is that you own your own space, I just want to share that ACT has owned this space ever since we started here. And what it enables us to be able to do is, A, we don't have to pay rent, but we do have to pay a lot of maintenance costs. That's part of owning your own building. But also, when we do a capital campaign or something like that, we can get a bridge loan. We can get help from the banking industry to take those risks and do building and expansion. So when you don't own your own building, you don't have those options. So I think that's important to understand why that's so important for artists.
Some of the takeaways that I took from the report that Katie just gave, the median earnings for creative occupations in Buncombe County are 14% below the current living wage for Buncombe County. So right there, it's an uphill climb. Another takeaway that 50 out of the 66 occupations in the arts have median earnings that fall below the living wage. 50 out of 66, that's terrible. And a little more than 15% of people said they previously had workspace in Buncombe County and now they don't. Where do you see opportunities? You're all making your own opportunities. You're all working hard in this. Where do you see untapped opportunity, whether it's through collaboration, financing, creative space making?
Since I have a microphone in my hand. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm having discussions with some of those itinerant theater groups about having rehearsal space in the studio. When we're not tracking, there's this beautiful space available, so why not take advantage of it for something like that? And I've done some work with UNCA. We've done some recording over there and those sorts of things. I feel like we could do a lot more collaboration when it comes to those sorts of things. I listened to the report and I started thinking that I have some ideas about how to do some more collaborations like that, but I think a lot of it is all of us recognizing that we can't work in silos, that we do have to collaborate, that we have to reach across to different disciplines and different areas of the arts and work together to find solutions. I made a point of when I hire subcontractors to do the work, I don't have full-time employees, I make sure I pay them a living wage. Unfortunately, that means that I have to pay that cost on to whoever is hiring us for whatever. So our costs have to go up a little bit to cover that. We've got to make our expenses and hopefully pay the rent. So it's a balancing act, right? The cost of living is high. I want to make sure that I'm paying my contractors enough to stay in Asheville, but I also want to make sure that I provide affordable services to people who are coming through and using our services. So it's an odd sort of balancing act. We're also talking about maybe doing some education programs where young folks, women especially, who are still grossly underrepresented in audio tech in particular. We're still less than 10% of the overall industry in the world. I have tried to bring in all women engineers. I want to create training programs for people of color, for people who don't necessarily have opportunities in their school systems or those sorts of things, and develop some training and internship programs to educate the next generation or two of audio and video techs.
Yeah. Ashleigh, Lexington Glassworks is one of the fixtures in the glass community around here. Are there efforts that your company is doing to bring in other glass artists or expand to be a home for more glass artists?
Sure. Our capacity is, small in that way. We have tried to find creative solutions to increase our workforce and to diversify our workforce within our company. And a few years ago, I think 3 years ago, we purchased a building, and we were very fortunate to be able to do that. Not our space that we actually blow glass in and work in every day, but another building that we could house our employees or other people. And so we were like, okay, so how do we get creative about attracting a diverse body of people to come and work in Asheville? For people who don't know, the glass world is very small. Trained professional glass artists, you don't put an ad out on Indeed for a glass blower. So it's a lot of networking and a lot of training people up and things like that. And we're trying to get different groups of people into the studio. And so we bought this building and we built this program called the Resident Assistantship Program, and we bring in artists for 3 to 6 month periods, and they have to have 1 year of experience in the glassblowing studio, and the application process is very easy. We want to make it accessible. You don't need to have a lengthy resume, and we're trying to open doors and level the playing field and get people through and have hands-on material and really allow people to work in the hot shop. Working with glass is an expensive art form. You need large pieces of equipment and material costs are high. And being able to give people access to our hot shop, because we don't do rental time. We're not an educational per se facility. We're a for-profit arts business. But how could we use our space and open that up to young artists?
Tell me a little more about this space. I didn't know about this.
An apartment building, yeah.
How many units?
It's 5 units,
Wow.
and we specifically were looking for something within a mile of our studios so that people didn't have to necessarily have a form of transportation to get there. You could walk, bike, ride a bus to
Are
get
these
to
for
work.
for out-of-town residents, glass students to come?
So we have 2 residents at a time. They stagger. And so we've had artists come in from places all over the country. But yeah, only 2 of those units are actually artist occupied that work at Lexington Glassworks. And interestingly enough, when we purchased the building, the other units were already occupied by artists.
Really?
Yeah, and we've tried, and it's still, with the exception of 1 unit, still occupied by all female artists who live and work in Asheville.
Well, that to me seems like a replicable thing to do that other organizations could potentially do. You're a small business, right? And how many, you said 6 employees.
We have 10.
So you have 10 employees.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a relatively small business. You bought a 5-unit building. Do you have a mandate, or you said it was about 3 years ago that you bought this. Do you have a mandate to keep this affordable in a certain way, or what's?
Well, that building was built in 1920-something, so it is an old building with lots of maintenance. We didn't increase rents for the first 2 years. This is the first year we've done rent increases, and we've remodeled 2 of the units. We really are passionate about affordable housing for artists. We lived in West Asheville. We were able to connect at the Wedge with another person there who hooked us up with an apartment that was affordable while we were getting our business started. And so we understand that sort of need for having a space that's clean, safe, and affordable.
Have any of you, or do you know people who are using or taking use of our community centers for space? These are city-owned spaces, city-managed spaces. There's a brand new center not far from the Burton Street neighborhood, the South neighborhood. I can't remember the name of that community center. Yeah, it's a brand new building with a new theater. And I'm wondering, is this an underutilized resource for our arts community?
Yeah, I can even for Blue Note, the Burton Street Center, the whole basement is not being used. And we created a whole plan. It's supposed to turn into a technology center, recording studio, and we did that in 2011.
Why do you think when we're so starved for affordable spaces, large enough spaces, these community centers, it's a multi-use proposition.
Right.
Why is our community at large not taking advantage of community centers as arts centers?
I suspect some of it is just knowledge of those spaces and how they could be used. I'm newish in town, so I don't know where all the community centers are. Even people who have lived here might not necessarily know that they're available for that kind of use. That's my guess.
When you were talking about what RadHaus is, and I think of the former Rabbit Motel that is Soundspace Studios, here are two privately developed rehearsal studio facilities. Yours is also a recording studio, but between the two of you, there's 6 rooms. Yeah. We've got this music-crushed community.
Yeah.
We've got so many musicians and bands, and we've got, in terms of dedicated band rehearsal studios, I don't know of any others.
There are 2 or 3 more small studios in town that are available as rehearsal studios.
Okay.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I was excited to get this space is that there was a room large enough to rehearse a band that I'm in that's a 9-piece band. Because not only are there few rehearsal rooms in town, but there are vanishingly small number of rooms large enough for a band that size. One of the reasons that I was excited about that space was not just that it would be a recording studio, video, media, production studio, but also that there would be a wing of it available for rehearsals, because we already felt it acutely how few rehearsal spaces there were in town.
Yeah. When you come to the visual arts, we're seeing galleries go away, or at least having to move. Tracy Morgan Gallery was in South Slope. Now, thanks to Randy Schul and Hetty Fisher, they're now in 22 London. It's actually been a good move for Tracy, but lucky to have that. And the Magnetic Theaters, in terms of theater space, they left the Rad.
That's sad. And Zappal closed a few years ago, and part of the reason they closed was because rents had gone up high enough that they couldn't justify it anymore.
Yeah, Satellite Gallery, which was in downtown right near Blue Ridge Public Radio, it's now, I think it's Va-Va-Voom. Are there any glimmers of light? All of you are part of, I think, of the guiding lights of where things can happen and where things can be replicated. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, so really exciting things that we've been doing in the River Arts District to try to continue to engage the community and people visiting is we evolved our very well-known fall studio stroll into Second Saturday Art Stroll. So really cool partnership with ArtsAVL. We have a trolley, if you don't know, that literally every second Saturday of the month you can get on, if I remember correctly, at noon to 6 is the new hours this year, but you can get on and it'll take you downtown and it'll take you right to the Rad and you can get on and off. You don't have to worry about parking. What a great initiative to help people get to the Rad, get downtown.
But this is just once a month.
Every second Saturday. Right. I mean, we have hopes to grow it. It's an expensive endeavor, but we're working on it. And additionally, on top of that, what we've done in the Rad 2 is we've layered on the launch this year of our 2024 theme, Who Am I, Who Are We? Which again, it's about getting out of the silo. So what was really important for me in coming into the presidential role this year is uniting us again as a coalition of people to get something just as a project that we can work on together. So each month we have a prompt and you essentially have a month to come up with something and you debut it at the Art Stroll, the Second Saturday Art Stroll. And so there's over 70 galleries and artists within the district participating. Every second Saturday you can go out, you can see new work from your favorite artist or gallery, and it's something really exciting to talk about. And there's also live painting. There's a lot going on in the district, and it's just going to continue to evolve. We're working on a really large festival event to launch in the fall of 2025. Again, uniting the district and coming up with the ways to work together as over 300 artists. And it's really exciting.
That's great. One of the things that has been mentioned, but we haven't really talked a lot about, is the Tourism Development Authority. I know, DeWayne, you've gotten some support for Blue Note Junction from the TDA, you said. I know ACT received some TDA funding. Are there things that you think is within the purview of TDA, tourism development related things that aren't happening?
Yes, I have one thing. I went to the last big meeting they have, and I think what was so shocking to me when I can't remember his name that came and spoke at that big town hall or big event, but it was all about, what's Asheville got to offer tourists? And not one thing was mentioned about the arts. Not one. In fact, I've also been in meetings where I've heard it called the River District. And I think that just the first thing we could get is a little bit of support from the tourism department. They're talking about the hiking. They're talking about the beer. What about the art?
This is something I've thought about for quite a while. I agree with you. If you look on the Explore Asheville website, if you dig in and know where the right links are, you'll see some selected events, but you can't really drill down to the music scene.
Yeah, we've actually had some trouble with that. We were trying to get the studio listed there, but they said it's not a tourism type thing. Actually, that's not necessarily true. We want the studio to become a destination studio because the art scene here is so great, because the music, all of the craft and art things and the beer and the food and all of that is all a big part of it. So getting them to understand that the arts scene is part of the attraction for people coming from out of town. Holy cow, the live music scene here is amazing. The arts scene here is amazing. And the fact that they're not focusing on that and actually brushed me off when I tried to get the studio listed because it wasn't considered a tourism industry was a little mystifying, quite honestly.
When you look at the tourists who are coming here and you were to ask them, and I've done just some sparse interviewing of tourists, never do the arts come up as a reason that they're coming here. And you look at what the TDA, when they market, they go to the US Open, they sponsor big events. But there's a real skill in marketing the arts that I think isn't happening.
I think that's true, but if you go and ask the Glass Center, they have over 50,000 people that come there to do classes every year, the North Carolina Glass Center. When you're in the district and you ask people around, there are plenty of people that are coming to visit for the district and for the art scene. It's just not being communicated at a larger scale. So I think that makes it a little bit more challenging. We're seeing it on the ground level, and we're also likewise seeing people that are showing up in the district here in Asheville their second time, and they were like, we never knew it was here. So if we had a little bit more support, maybe they would have found it the first time.
So we're actually out of time.
Yeah.
I'm going to come up here, and I just want to say that our last town hall was actually on arts marketing, and it was in partnership with Explore Asheville, and they really actually do a lot to support the arts in our community. From a lot of the capital and renovation projects that happen, as well as festival and event grants. And there is a lot of marketing that's done for the arts by Explore Asheville. Could it be improved? Sure. We all have some work to do, but I would say that they are doing a good job in supporting the arts in our community, including sponsoring the ArtsAVL trolley, which is this second Saturday.
Right.
The full report will be on our website by the end of today. I hope you found this enlightening. There's a lot more information in the 100-page report. And then this is just the beginning of a long conversation. Let's give our panel a big round of applause. Thank you all for coming out today. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank Katie Cornell of ArtsAVL for inviting me to moderate today's panel. If you value the Overlook's place in Asheville's media landscape, please consider joining dozens of others who are supporting the show through my Patreon crowdfunding page. Become a member for as little as $5 a month. Visit patreon.com/theoverlookpodcast. Our First Look newsletter gives you just a handful of daily headlines from around the local media landscape to get you on your morning. We also have a weekly newsletter devoted to all things The Overlook that hits you every Friday. Both are free and available at podavl.com/newsletter. The theme song for The Overlook, Maker's Song, comes to us courtesy of the Asheville duo The Resonant Rogues. The Overlook is a production of Podcast Asheville. New episodes come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on any social media channel at AVL Overlook. And I'll see you on the next episode of The Overlook with Matt Peiken.